Hey everyone, how's your day going? Whether it's been good or rough, you're not alone. So sit back, relax, and let's step into the world of mystery together.
I had just graduated college and was desperate to find an affordable place to live. Renting an apartment alone wasn't an option. I simply couldn't afford it. So, like a lot of people, I turned to online roommate listings. That's when I found a deal that almost seemed too good to be true. A 2-bedroom apartment in a decent part of town for way less than I expected. The guy renting it, Carlos, wasn't much for conversation. His messages were short, to the point, and he didn't ask many questions. Just, "When can you move in?" The pictures looked fine, and honestly, I didn't have the luxury of being picky. When I met Carlos in person, something felt off. He was quiet, barely looked at me, and spoke in a flat, almost expressionless voice. But aside from being a little strange, he didn't seem like a bad guy. The apartment was clean, and my room was already furnished, which saved me money. But there was one weird detail. Sitting on a shelf, facing the bed, was a large teddy bear. Its glassy black eyes reflected the dim light in the room, giving it an oddly lifelike stare. I gestured toward it and asked, "What's up with the bear?" Carlos let out a low chuckle, like he found something amusing that I didn't understand. Then, in his usual flat tone, he said, "It came with the place. Best not to mess with it." There was something about the way he said it that sent a slight shiver down my spine. But I wasn't about to let a stuffed bear freak me out. I just nodded and went back to unpacking. That night, after getting ready for bed, I stepped into the bathroom. That's when I noticed something strange. The mirror was fogged up, like someone had just been standing there, breathing onto the glass. But I had only been in there for a few seconds, long enough to turn on the sink, but definitely not long enough for steam to form. I stood there for a second, my pulse slightly quickening. Maybe I was imagining it. I shook it off, turned off the lights, and climbed into bed. I had almost drifted off when I heard it. Faint clicking noise. It was barely noticeable, like the sound of something tiny moving, but it was definitely there. Click, click, click. It was coming from the kitchen. Carlos had gone to bed a while ago, so why did it sound like someone, or something, was still awake? A slow, uneasy feeling crept up my spine. Something about this place felt wrong. And that night, I realized I wasn't alone. Over the next few days, I just couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. At first, I told myself it was just nerves adjusting to a new place, living with someone I barely knew. But it wasn't just that. Something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was this strange sensation like I wasn't alone, even when I knew Carlos was in his room or out of the apartment. Every time I walked into my bedroom, it felt like someone had been in there before me, like the air was still settling from an unseen presence. And then the little things started happening. One morning, I woke up and noticed my bedroom door was slightly open. I always closed it before going to sleep. I was sure of it. Maybe I had just forgotten? That's what I told myself. But it kept happening. Some nights, I'd go to bed, door shut tight, only to wake up and find it cracked open an inch or two. Then there was the night I woke up suddenly, not to a sound, but to a feeling. I didn't know what had stirred me at first, but then I heard it. A quiet, breathy chuckle. It was distant, muffled, like someone laughing under their breath. My heart started pounding. I strained to listen, my ears searching for any sign of movement. But after a few seconds, the apartment fell completely silent. I told myself it was nothing, just my mind playing tricks in the middle of the night. But the next morning, something else unsettled me even more. My closet door was open. Not wide open, just slightly, like someone had nudged it from the inside. I stood there for a long moment, staring at it. Had I left it like that? No. I never slept with my closet open. It made me uncomfortable. I took a deep breath and walked over, slowly pulling the door open all the way. Everything inside looked normal. My clothes were still hanging, my bags were untouched. But it felt wrong, like someone had been in there. I tried to put it out of my mind, but later that night, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard something new. A soft, mechanical whirring sound. It wasn't coming from outside. It was inside my room. I turned slowly, scanning my surroundings. My eyes landed on the teddy bear, still sitting on the shelf. And that's when I noticed one of its eyes looked different. Not cracked, not scratched, just wrong. And then it hit me. That wasn't an eye at all. I stood frozen, my eyes locked onto the teddy bear. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. One of its black, glossy eyes wasn't an eye at all. Now that I was looking closely, I could see it, a tiny, almost invisible lens embedded just beneath the plastic surface. A camera. A wave of nausea hit me. My hands started to shake as I reached out and grabbed the bear off the shelf. The fur felt stiff and aged, but beneath it, something solid. I turned it around, running my fingers over the back seam until I felt it, a hard lump sewn beneath the fabric. With a sharp pull, I tore at the stitching. The old seams ripped apart, stuffing spilling onto my floor. And there, buried deep inside, was a tiny black recording device, a small red light blinking softly. I nearly dropped it. Someone had been watching me. For how long? Days? Weeks? The thought made my stomach twist into knots. I stumbled backward, gripping the tiny device in my shaking hands. I needed to confront Carlos. I stormed out of my room, my pulse hammering in my ears. I slammed my fist against his door. "Carlos!" I yelled. Nothing. I hit it again, harder. Carlos opened the door. No response. A cold dread spread through my chest. Something about the silence felt wrong. Then I saw it. The light under his door just went out. I hadn't heard any movement. No footsteps. No shifting. Just darkness. A chill crept up my spine. I reached for the doorknob, twisting it locked. I pressed my ear against the wood, straining to hear anything. No breathing. No sounds. Just dead, suffocating silence. I backed away, my mind screaming at me to get out of there. I rushed back into my room, locking the door behind me. My hands fumbled for my phone, and with shaking fingers, I pulled up the Wi-Fi settings. And that's when I saw it. Room 2, live feed. My entire body tensed. I tapped on it. A loading wheel spun for a few seconds before the screen flickered to life. My stomach dropped. It was my room. The image on my phone showed my bedroom from the teddy bear's perspective. I swallowed hard, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I scrolled through the other available feeds. Another one. I clicked. The hallway. Another. The bathroom. Another. The living room. I hesitated before clicking on the last feed. Carlos's room. The screen flickered for a moment before the image appeared. A single wooden chair sat in the center of his dimly lit room. And in that chair, Carlos. I felt my breath catch in my throat. He was sitting perfectly still. His hands rested in his lap. His head was tilted downward. Then, as if sensing me watching, he slowly, unnaturally slowly, lifted his head. His eyes locked onto the camera. Onto me. My chest tightened. Then he smiled. Not a normal smile. It stretched too far, too slow, as if he was savoring some sick joke that I wasn't in on. And then, the screen cut to black. A cold sweat broke out on my skin. And then, from just outside my door, the doorknob turned. I barely had time to react. I took a shaky step backward. The light flickered. And then, from the hallway, in a voice so low and quiet it sent shivers down my spine, I heard it. "You really shouldn't have touched the bear." The doorknob twisted again. Slow, deliberate, testing. I took a step back, my heartbeat hammering against my ribs. And then, a whisper. "You really shouldn't have touched the bear." The voice was soft, almost playful, but it was right outside my door. I acted on instinct. My hand shot forward, grabbing the doorknob and slamming it shut before it could open any further. Click. I locked it. Silence. I stood there, my breath ragged, my mind racing. Then, knock, knock, knock. I clenched my teeth. Slow, controlled knocking. Not frantic, not rushed. Like he was waiting. I forced myself to move, my hands shaking as I fumbled for my phone. 911. I needed to call 911. Before I could press the button, a metallic scraping sound. Right against the door. A knife? A key? Something sharp dragging across the surface. I backed away, every muscle in my body coiled so tight it hurt. Then I heard it, footsteps. Fast. Rushing away from my door. My stomach dropped. He was going to the other door. I spun around, bolting for the window. The fire escape. It was my only way out. I unlocked the latch and threw the window open just as a thump. A heavy impact against my bedroom door. He was trying to break in. I lunged onto the fire escape, my hands gripping the freezing metal as I swung my legs over. Above me. The door burst open. Carlos stepped into my room. And then he saw me. For a second, neither of us moved. He stood in the doorway, staring. Then, without hesitation, he climbed onto the windowsill. He was coming after me. I scrambled down the fire escape as fast as I could, skipping steps, my feet nearly slipping on the cold metal. Halfway down, I heard a noise that made my chest lock up with terror. The metal rattling above me. I risked a glance upward. Carlos was climbing down. He wasn't running. He wasn't panicked. He was calm, focused, like he knew exactly what he was doing. I jumped the last few feet, hitting the pavement hard. My ankle twisted, pain shooting up my leg, but I barely felt it. I ran. I ran like my life depended on it. I didn't stop running until I reached a gas station a few blocks away. I burst through the doors, nearly collapsing against the counter. The cashier, a young guy, looked up in alarm. "Dude, are you okay?" I couldn't speak. My chest heaved. My hands trembled. I felt like my entire body was shutting down from sheer panic. I reached for my phone. "Call 911. Call 911. My phone buzzed. My stomach turned to ice. A new text message. No caller ID. Just 3 words. "You can't run." My hands went limp. My phone nearly slipped from my grip. No. How did he have my number? How was he texting me? And then I realized he had been in my room. That night, while I was sleeping, he had been in my room. The air in my lungs vanished. My vision swam. I turned to the cashier, my voice barely above a whisper. "Call the police." The cops arrived fast. I told them everything: Carlos, the cameras, the messages. They drove me back to the apartment. My stomach twisted into knots the entire ride. But when we got there, Carlos was gone. His room was empty, like he had never been there at all. The cops checked the building's security cameras. Every single file from the past week was wiped. Gone. Like he knew I was going to call the police. Like he had planned for this. And then it hit me. I didn't escape. I was let go. The cops searched every inch of the apartment. The closets, the bathroom, the kitchen, even the crawl space in the hallway ceiling. Carlos was gone. Not just missing, erased. His room was completely empty. No clothes, no personal belongings, not even a stray sock. Just a single wooden chair sitting in the center of the room. It didn't make sense. I had just seen him. He had chased me down the fire escape. He had been right there just minutes ago. I turned to the officer nearest to me. "He lived here," I insisted, my voice shaky. The cop glanced around before responding. "Doesn't look like it." No, that wasn't possible. I had heard him in here. I had seen him. My stomach churned as I turned, scanning the room for any sign that he had ever existed. That's when I noticed it. The teddy bear, sitting back on the shelf. My pulse stopped for a second. That wasn't possible. I had ripped it open, torn out the hidden camera inside. I had thrown it across the room in a panic. But there it was, untouched, like nothing had ever happened. I slowly reached for it, every muscle in my body tense. I turned it over, expecting to see torn seams, shredded fabric. Anything to prove that I wasn't losing my mind. There was nothing. The stitches were intact, the fabric perfectly smooth. And the worst part? The camera, I was still there, still intact, still staring. I dropped it like it burned me, stumbling backward into the doorway. I couldn't stay here, couldn't breathe. I barely heard the officers talking behind me, telling me they'd file a report, that I should stay somewhere else for the night. I just nodded numbly, grabbed my keys, and walked outside. The cold air hit my face, but it didn't help. My mind was racing too fast, my chest tightening like a vice. I stopped at the curb, sucking in shaky breaths, trying to convince myself this was over. Then, my phone vibrated. I almost dropped it. A new text message. No caller ID. Just 2 words. "Turn around." I went completely still. No, I wouldn't. This was a game. He was trying to get inside my head. I swallowed hard, gripping my phone so tight my fingers ached. Then, the street lamp next to me flickered. The air turned ice cold, a chill creeping up my spine. And then I heard it. A breath, not mine, right behind me. A slow, ragged inhale, like someone was standing so close I should have felt their presence. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay frozen. But I couldn't. I turned, and the street was empty. The sidewalk stretched out in both directions. No movement, no one nearby. But then, I looked up. At my apartment window, the blinds were open, but I never left them open. And standing inside my room was a figure, tall, motionless, watching me. I couldn't make out a face, just the vague outline of a person, backlit by the dim glow of the streetlights. Then tilted its head, not smoothly, not naturally, like it was acknowledging me. I took a step back, my heart pounding so hard I felt it in my throat. Then, another vibration, another message. I didn't want to look, but my shaking hands raised the phone anyway. And this time, the message was longer. A single sentence. You left the door unlocked. I stopped breathing, because I knew for a fact that I had locked the door when I left. I stared at the message on my phone. You left the door unlocked. I knew that wasn't true. I had locked it. I had checked it twice. But the second I read those words, a sickening realization settled in my gut. It wasn't a warning. It was a fact. I turned my gaze upward to my apartment window, and there, standing just beyond the glass, was a figure. Tall, motionless, watching. I took a step back, my pulse hammering against my ribs. Then the figure moved. A slow tilt of the head. A gesture that said, "I see you." I didn't wait. I turned and ran. I called 911 from the gas station, my voice shaking so badly I could barely get the words out. "Someone is in my apartment." I locked the door. I swear I locked the door. The dispatcher kept me on the line as police raced to the scene. When they arrived, I stayed back, watching from the edge of the parking lot. The lights of their flashlights flickered through my apartment windows. For several minutes, nothing. Then movement. A crash. My stomach twisted. They'd found someone. But then silence. I watched, my breath caught in my throat as an officer walked back out. And I knew. Before he even opened his mouth, I knew. There's no one inside. The words hit like a punch to the gut. "That's impossible," I whispered. I followed them up the stairs, my hands clammy, my head spinning. Inside, the apartment felt different. Like someone had been here just moments ago, but wasn't anymore. Like the air itself had been disturbed. Then, one of the officers gestured toward my bedroom wall. "Sir, you need to see this." I turned my head, and my blood ran cold. Scratched into the wall, deep, jagged letters carved with something sharp, was a message. "I let you leave." My stomach lurched. I stumbled backward. One of the officers ran a hand over his face, exhaling sharply. "Whoever did this, they had a key," he muttered. "The lease. The listing for the apartment. Had Carlos even been real? Or was he just another face in whatever this was?" Something sick twisted in my gut. I wasn't supposed to leave, but someone had decided to let me go. This time. I never went back to that apartment. I packed what little I could in broad daylight, never stepping inside alone, and left the rest behind. The police never found Carlos. No lease under his name. No records. No proof he even existed. And the cameras? All of them were wiped clean. Not broken. Not removed. Just erased. Like whoever had been watching me wasn't finished yet. Like they were just waiting for the next tenant. I tell this story because I need you to listen. When you move into a new place, check everything. The vents, the outlets, the smoke detectors. Because you don't know who was there before you. Or worse, who never left.